The auction block stood in the torchlight like a devil's altar, and Gabriel Preston knew he was about to commit either the greatest mercy or the worst mistake of his 32 years on this earth, when he raised his hand to bid on the young woman with terror-bright eyes. Midnight in Hillsborough, New Mexico Territory, felt different in the summer of 1877. The air hung thick and oppressive, carrying dust, and the stench of too many unwashed bodies crowded into the street outside the saloon. Gabriel had ridden into town 3 hours earlier, with no intention of stopping beyond watering his horse and buying supplies. He had been driving cattle from his small ranch to the railhead for the past week, bone-tired and ready to collapse into his bedroll under the stars rather than waste money on a hotel room. But then he had heard the commotion. Men were gathering outside the Golden Rose Saloon, their voices raised in excitement and something darker. Gabriel had learned long ago to mind his own business in situations like this, but something pulled at him, some instinct that would not let him simply ride away. He tied his horse to the rail and pushed through the crowd, his tall frame and broad shoulders making a path where his words might not have. What he saw made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. A man named Douglas Kemp, a railroad manager with more money than morality, was conducting what he called a debt auction. 3 women stood on a makeshift platform, all of them looking various degrees of terrified and defeated. Kemp was explaining in a loud, jovial voice that these women had been traveling west with families who had accumulated debts at his railroad hotel. The families had disappeared in the night, leaving the women behind as collateral. All legal and proper, Kemp announced, waving a sheaf of papers. These ladies signed contracts as guarantors. The debt must be paid one way or another. Any gentleman here can settle their obligations and take ownership of said contracts. They work off what is owed, simple as that. The crowd roared its approval. Gabriel felt sick. He had seen plenty of ugly things in his years in the West, had done a few he was not proud of himself, but this crossed lines he did not even know he had. 2 of the women were older, possibly in their 40s, faces lined with hard living. They stood with a kind of grim resignation that suggested this was not the first time life had beaten them down. But the 3rd woman was different. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, with dark auburn hair that caught the torchlight like aged copper. Her dress was simple calico, dusty and worn, but she wore it with her spine straight and her chin up. What caught Gabriel's attention was not her youth or her beauty, though she had both in measure. It was the fierce defiance in her green eyes, the way she looked at Douglas Kemp like she was memorizing his face for some future reckoning. She was terrified. He could see that clearly, but she refused to let that terror bend her, and something in Gabriel's chest tightened with recognition. He had seen that same expression in the mirror after his parents died, when he was 18 and suddenly alone with a failing ranch and debts of his own. Kemp started the bidding with the older women. The amounts were relatively small, and they were quickly purchased by men who claimed to need cooks or laundresses. Gabriel hoped that was true and not euphemisms for darker purposes, but he knew better than to be optimistic. When both women were led away, Kemp turned his attention to the young woman. "Now, gentlemen, here is the prize of the evening. This is Miss Olivia Anderson, late of Missouri, traveling west with her uncle's family. The debt is considerable, $240, but as you can see, the collateral is of exceptional quality." Olivia's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white. Young, healthy, educated enough to read and write. Strong back for work, pretty face for the home. "Gentlemen, shall we start the bidding at $50? Hands shot up around Gabriel. The numbers climbed quickly, men shouting over each other. $75, 100, 125. Gabriel watched Olivia's face as the amounts rose. She was searching the crowd, trying to see who was bidding, what kind of men were attempting to buy her like a horse or a piece of furniture. At $150, the bidding slowed. Only 3 men were still competing. Gabriel recognized one of them, a rancher named Silas Drummond, who had a reputation for working his hired hands near to death. The second was a saloon owner from the next town over, a man Gabriel had never met, but whose establishment was known for offering more than whiskey to its customers. The third was a younger man, probably not yet 25. Grinning like this was all a grand entertainment. Gabriel's hands had been in his pockets, his whole body tense with the desire to leave, to not witness this, to pretend he had never seen it. But when Olivia's eyes swept across the crowd and landed on him for just a moment, something broke open inside him. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the loneliness that had been eating at him since his mother died 2 years ago, leaving him entirely alone in the world. Maybe it was just that he could not stand by and watch this happen to someone who looked at the world with such defiant hope despite everything. $250, he heard himself say, his voice cutting through the noise. The crowd fell silent. Men turned to stare at him. Kemp's eyes lit up with greedy delight. 250, we have 250. That is more than the debt itself, sir. Very generous. Do I hear 260? Silas Drummond spat into the dirt. Too rich for my blood for a house girl. He stepped back. The saloon owner hesitated, eyeing Gabriel's tall frame and the gun at his hip, then shook his head. The young man looked annoyed but shrugged and turned away. 250 going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the back. Sir, step forward and claim your purchase. Gabriel's legs moved automatically, carrying him through the crowd that parted before him. He was aware of Olivia's eyes on him, wide and uncertain. Up close, she was even younger than he had thought, her face still holding the last softness of youth despite the hardness in her eyes. She studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. Your name, sir? Kemp asked, pulling out a document. Gabriel Preston. Excellent. Your ranch is which direction? 6 miles north, up along the river valley. Kemp scribbled on the document. Miss Anderson here is now under contract to you until such time as her debt is worked off. At fair wages, that should be about 3 years of service. She is to be provided room and board, and she is not to leave your property without permission. All very legal and proper. Sign here. Gabriel took the pen and signed his name, hating himself a little more with each stroke. He counted out $250 from his cattle money, watching his profits disappear into Kemp's greasy palm. The man handed him a copy of the contract and gestured toward Olivia. She is all yours. Treat her well or do not. That is your business now. Gabriel folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He looked at Olivia, who was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Fear was there, certainly, but also calculation, as if she was trying to figure out what kind of man had just bought her. You have any belongings? Gabriel asked quietly. She blinked, seemingly surprised that he had spoken to her rather than about her. A bag. Inside the saloon. Get it. We are leaving. She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared into the saloon. The crowd was dispersing now that the entertainment was over. Gabriel stood alone on the street, aware of eyes still on him, of men wondering what he planned to do with his purchase. His skin crawled with the attention. Olivia emerged a few minutes later carrying a worn carpet bag that looked like it held everything she owned in the world. She stopped a few paces from him, waiting. My horse is this way, Gabriel said, and started walking without checking to see if she followed. He heard her footsteps behind him, quick and light. When they reached his horse, a sturdy roan gelding named Rusty, Gabriel untied the reins and turned to face her properly. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Good, you will ride with me. It is 6 miles to my ranch, and I would rather not walk in the dark." He swung up into the saddle and offered her his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then at his face, then back at his hand. Finally, she took it. Her hand was small in his, calloused in a way that told him she was no stranger to hard work. He pulled her up behind him, and she settled onto the horse's back, her bag clutched against her chest. "You will need to hold on," Gabriel said. "The trail is rough in places." There was a pause, then he felt her free arm wrap hesitantly around his waist. She held herself stiffly, as if trying to touch him as little as possible. Gabriel could not blame her. He clicked his tongue and urged Rusty into a walk, then a trot as they left the lights of Hillsborough behind. They rode in silence for the first 2 miles. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead, the moon 3/4 full and bright enough to light the trail. The land around them was typical of the New Mexico territory, rolling hills covered in scrub brush and yucca, occasional stands of juniper and piñon pine. A dry creek bed ran parallel to the trail, waiting for the monsoon rains that would come later in the summer. Gabriel's mind was churning. What had he done? He had just spent nearly every dollar from his cattle sale to buy a woman's contract. He had done it on impulse, without thinking through the reality of what came next. He lived alone on his ranch, had done so since his mother's death. The place was small, just a 2-room cabin his father had built when Gabriel was a boy. One room served as kitchen and living area, the other was a bedroom. There was a small barn for Rusty and the 2 milk cows, a chicken coop, and a root cellar. That was it. How was he supposed to house a young woman there without impropriety, and what must she think of him? A stranger who had bought her in the night like property. He had wanted to save her from whatever fate awaited her with the other bidders, but from her perspective, he was just another man who now owned her contract and could do with her as he pleased. The thought made him feel ill. "Are you going to hurt me?" Olivia's voice cut through the night, so quiet he almost missed it over the sound of Rusty's hooves on the packed earth. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "No." "Why should I believe you?" It was a fair question. "Because I give you my word, and my mother raised me to keep my word, especially to women. But you are right not to trust me. You do not know me." "Then why did you buy my contract?" Gabriel was silent for a moment, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. "Because the other men bidding were not good men. Because you looked like you deserved better than to be sold to the highest bidder. Because I could not ride away and live with myself after. So you bought me out of guilt, maybe, or stupidity. I have not decided which yet." Despite everything, he heard a small, sharp exhale that might have been a laugh. "At least you are honest about your confusion. I have never bought a person before. I do not know the protocol." "There is no protocol. This whole situation is wrong." Her voice shook slightly on the last word, and Gabriel realized she was closer to breaking than she wanted to admit. "Yes, it is," he agreed quietly. "For what it is worth, I am sorry you are in this position." "Sorry does not change it." "No, it does not." They fell silent again. Gabriel could feel the tension in her body through the arm around his waist, the way she held herself ready to bolt, despite being on a moving horse miles from town. He wanted to say something to reassure her, but what reassurance could he possibly offer? She was bound to him by a contract that gave him legal power over her for years. Any promises he made were only as good as his character, which she had no reason to trust. By the time they reached his ranch, it was nearly 2 in the morning. The cabin sat in a small valley with the river running close by, cottonwood trees rustling in the night breeze. Gabriel's father had chosen the location well, sheltered from the worst winds and with good water access. The cabin looked small and lonely in the moonlight, but it was home. Gabriel reined Rusty to a stop in front of the barn and dismounted. He offered his hand to Olivia again, and again she hesitated before taking it. Her fingers were trembling now, exhaustion or fear or both catching up with her. He helped her down, and she stood unsteadily for a moment, swaying. "When did you last eat?" Gabriel asked. "Yesterday morning," he muttered a curse under his breath. "Come inside, I will make food." "I can cook," she said quickly. "I am supposed to work off my debt, I should cook." "You are supposed to work off a debt you never owed in the first place. And you are exhausted. Come inside, sit down, and I will make food. We can figure out everything else tomorrow." He did not wait for her to argue, just walked to the cabin and pushed open the door. The interior was dark and cool. Gabriel lit a lamp and warm light filled the main room. It was not much to look at, he knew. A table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, shelves with supplies and a few books, a stove in the corner. Everything was clean but worn, the furniture his parents had made when they first settled here 30 years ago. Olivia stepped inside carefully, looking around with those sharp green eyes of hers. Gabriel could almost see her cataloging everything, assessing her new prison. "The other room is the bedroom," he said, gesturing to the closed door. "You will sleep there, I will sleep out here." She turned to him, surprise clear on her face. "What? The bedroom?" "It was my parents' room, then my mother's after my father died. You will have privacy and a proper bed. I have been sleeping out here since my mother passed anyway. The rocking chair is comfortable enough." "You are giving me the bedroom. You are a woman alone and frightened in the home of a strange man. The least I can do is give you a door you can bar from the inside." He moved to the stove and started building a fire in the firebox. "There is a water pitcher and basin in there and clean linens on the bed. My mother's clothes are still in the trunk. You can use what fits until we can get you proper things of your own." Olivia was staring at him like he had started speaking a foreign language. "I do not understand you." "That makes 2 of us." Gabriel set a pan on the stove and went to the shelf, pulling down cornmeal and bacon. "Sit down before you fall down. You are pale as milk." She moved to the table and sat, placing her carpetbag on the floor beside her. Gabriel worked in silence, mixing up corn cakes and frying bacon, trying not to think about the surreal nature of the situation. Here he was at 2 in the morning, cooking for a woman he had bought at an auction, a woman who was looking at him like he might transform into a monster at any moment. When the food was ready, he set a plate in front of her and took the chair across from her with his own plate. Olivia looked down at the food, then up at him. "Eat," Gabriel said. "Please." She picked up her fork and took a small bite, then another. Within seconds, she was eating like she was starving, which she probably was. Gabriel ate his own food more slowly, watching her and trying to figure out what happened next. When she finally slowed down, her plate nearly empty, she looked up and caught him watching her. Color rose in her cheeks. "Sorry, that was not ladylike. You were hungry, nothing to apologize for, you keep being kind. It is unnerving." Gabriel set down his fork. "Miss Anderson, I need you to understand something. I did not buy your contract to have a servant or a bed warmer or any of the other things you are probably imagining. I bought it because the alternative was leaving you to be bought by men with worse intentions. This whole situation is wrong, as you said. I am not going to pretend I own you or that you owe me anything. The contract says I owe you 3 years of work. The contract is a piece of paper signed under duress. It is not worth the ink it is written in, as far as I am concerned." Olivia leaned back in her chair, studying him with those intense eyes. "Then why not just tear it up? Why not let me go? The question hung in the air between them. Gabriel had asked himself the same thing during the ride from town. Why not just give her some money and let her leave? Because it is the middle of the night, and you have nowhere to go, he said finally. Because Hillsborough is full of men who saw you sold tonight and would have opinions about you traveling alone. Because tearing up the contract does not erase the fact that Douglas Kemp thinks you owe him money, and he would just find you and sell you again. Because the world is not kind to women without protection or resources, and I would rather you had both before you left. So you are my protector now. I am offering you a place to stay until you figure out what you want to do next. If that means working on the ranch while you save money for travel, fine. If it means staying until we can contact your family and get you home, also fine. If it means something else entirely, we will work it out. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her plate. I do not have a family to go back to. My parents died 3 years ago. I was living with my uncle, my father's brother. He decided to move west to California, and I came along because I had nowhere else to go. We stopped in Hillsborough 2 weeks ago. The railroad hotel was expensive, and my uncle kept saying we would leave the next day, but the next day never came. Finally, the bill was so high that he panicked. He woke me up 4 nights ago and told me he was leaving, that he had signed papers making me responsible for the debt, that I would have to work it off. Then he left, just like that. Took his wife and children and left me sleeping in a room at that hotel with a bill I could never pay. Gabriel felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and bright. What kind of man abandoned his own niece to that fate? That is a coward's way. Yes, it was. Olivia's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. And I was a fool to trust him. I knew he resented me. His wife never wanted me there, but I thought family meant something. I thought he would not just leave me. You are not a fool for expecting basic human decency from your family. She laughed, a bitter sound. Apparently I am. Gabriel wanted to say something comforting, but he had never been good with words, especially emotional ones. His father had been a taciturn man, more comfortable with silence than conversation, and Gabriel had inherited that tendency. His mother had been warmer, more expressive, but she had been gone for 2 years now. He had forgotten how to talk to people about things that mattered. The bedroom is through there, he said instead, standing and gathering their plates. There is a bar for the door. Use it. Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning when we are both thinking more clearly. Olivia stood as well, picking up her bag. She looked at him for a long moment, and he wondered what she saw. A lonely cowboy who had made an impulsive decision, a potential threat. A strange, awkward man who did not know what he was doing. Thank you, she said quietly, for the food and the bed, and for not being the worst person you could have been tonight. That is a low bar. It is the bar I have right now. She walked to the bedroom door, paused with her hand on the knob, then looked back. Gabriel Preston. Yes. Why do you live out here all alone? The question caught him off guard. My parents are dead. I have no siblings. The ranch is small, but it is mine. I do not need much company. That sounds lonely. It is, he admitted, but lonely is familiar. I know how to live with lonely. Something shifted in her expression, a recognition or understanding. So do I. Then she slipped into the bedroom and closed the door. A moment later, he heard the bar slide into place. Gabriel stood in the main room, listening to the soft sounds of her moving around, then the creak of the bed as she lay down. He extinguished the lamp and moved to the rocking chair in the darkness. The chair had been his mother's favorite spot, where she would sit in the evenings and knit or mend clothes. Gabriel had spent countless hours as a child sitting at her feet in this chair, listening to her stories about growing up in Tennessee, about meeting his father, about their journey west. The chair still smelled faintly of her, lavender from the soap she made. Gabriel leaned back and closed his eyes, but sleep would not come. His mind was too full of the events of the night, of Olivia's face when she was on that auction block, of the weight of her arm around his waist during the ride home, of her voice saying, "So do I," when he admitted to loneliness. What had he done? And more importantly, what was he going to do now? The answer would not come in the darkness. Gabriel sat in his mother's rocking chair and waited for dawn. Morning came slowly, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale pink. Gabriel had not slept, just dozed in fits between long stretches of uncomfortable wakefulness. His back ached from the chair, and his mind felt fuzzy with exhaustion. He stood and stretched, joints popping, then quietly built up the fire in the stove and put coffee on to brew. He was standing at the window, watching the sunrise and drinking his first cup, when he heard the bedroom door open. He turned to see Olivia step out, and his breath caught slightly in his throat. She had changed out of her dusty calico dress into one of his mother's old dresses, a simple blue cotton that she had belted tightly at the waist. It was slightly too big for her, but the color brought out the green of her eyes. Her hair was unbound, falling past her shoulders in waves, and her face was freshly washed. She looked younger in the morning light, and Gabriel felt a pang of protectiveness so strong it surprised him. "Coffee," he offered, gesturing to the pot. "Please." He poured her a cup and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Gabriel quickly pulled away, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. Olivia wrapped both hands around the cup and took a sip, closing her eyes as the hot liquid worked its magic. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "Some." "You, better than I have in weeks, honestly. That bed is comfortable and the door has a lock. Those two things alone made it the best night I have had since my uncle decided to drag us all west." Gabriel nodded. "There is bread if you are hungry. And I need to go milk the cows and feed the chickens. You can come with me if you want, see the property, or you can stay inside. Whatever you prefer." Olivia set down her coffee cup. "I should help. That is why I am here, right? To work." "You are here because you had nowhere else to go, and I happen to have the money to get you out of an impossible situation. Work is negotiable. Nothing is free, Gabriel. Everyone wants something. What do you want?" The directness of the question made him uncomfortable. What did he want? He barely knew himself. "I want to get through the day without any more terrible decisions. I want my cattle to bring in enough money to keep the ranch going another year. I want to stop feeling like I am drowning in loneliness every time I sit in that chair." He had not meant to say that last part, but it slipped out anyway. Olivia looked at the rocking chair, then back at him. "That was your mother's chair." "Yes, you miss her." "Every day. My mother's chair was by the window in our house in Missouri. She would sit there in the afternoons and watch the road, waiting for my father to come home from the fields. After she died, I used to sit there and pretend I was waiting for her to come home instead." Olivia picked up her coffee cup again, hiding behind it. "Grief is strange. It lives in objects sometimes." Gabriel did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood loss, who did not need to fill every moment with words. "Come help me with the animals," Gabriel said finally, "and I will show you around. Then we can figure out what comes next." They worked together in the morning light, and Gabriel found himself watching her when he thought she was not looking. She moved with an easy competence around the barn, clearly familiar with farm animals. She talked softly to the cows while she helped him milk them, her hands gentle but efficient. The chickens scattered at her approach, and she laughed, the sound surprising him with its brightness. "They are suspicious of me," she said, tossing corn to the birds. "They think I am going to steal their eggs. You might be. I might be, she agreed and smiled at him. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. The wariness and fear that had been there since the auction melted away, leaving behind someone young and alive and beautiful. Gabriel felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the rising sun. They finished the morning chores and went back inside for a proper breakfast. Gabriel made eggs from the hens and fried potatoes, and they ate in a silence that was becoming easier with each passing hour. Olivia helped him clean up, moving around the small kitchen like she was already learning its geography. "We should talk about the practical matters," Gabriel said as he dried the last plate. "You need clothes that fit properly. I need to go into town in a few days for supplies. You can come with me, or I can take your measurements and buy things for you." "I would rather not go back to Hillsborough," Olivia said quietly. "Not yet. Too many people saw what happened last night. Understood, I will get what you need." He paused, then pulled the contract from his jacket pocket. "And we should talk about this." Olivia looked at the paper like it was a snake. "What about it?" "I meant what I said last night. I do not consider this binding. But legally it exists, and Douglas Kemp knows it exists. If you try to leave and he finds out, he could cause problems. So we need to figure out a plan." "What kind of plan?" Gabriel sat down at the table and gestured for her to do the same. "Option 1. You stay here for the 3 years the contract specifies. I pay you fair wages for any work you do, and at the end of 3 years, the contract is fulfilled and you are free to go wherever you want with money saved up. Option 2. You stay here while we save up $240 to pay off the debt to Kemp. That would probably take about a year, maybe less. Then the contract is voided and you are free. Option 3. You stay here while I try to find a legal way to challenge the contract's validity. That could take years and might not work." "And option 4?" Olivia asked. "Is there an option 4 where I just leave now and take my chances?" "There is. But that option means running and hiding and looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, because Kemp would consider you stolen property and could cause trouble for both of us." Olivia was quiet, staring at the table. Gabriel watched emotions flicker across her face, too quick to name. Finally, she looked up at him. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should stay here for now, at least through the summer. Work if you want to, or do not. Let me pay off Kemp's original debt. Once that is done, the contract is void, and you can make decisions about your future without anyone having a legal claim on you." "Why would you do that? You already paid him $250. Why would you pay him more?" "Because the $250 was to get you out of that situation. The $240 is to make sure you stay out of it permanently, and because I have the money, or I will once I sell off another round of cattle in the fall." Olivia shook her head slowly. "I do not understand you at all, Gabriel Preston. You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the most naive. Probably the latter. I do not have much experience with people." "That is obvious." But she said it without malice, almost affectionately. "All right, I will stay for now. But I want to work. I need to feel like I am earning my keep or I will go mad. What needs doing around here?" Gabriel looked around the cabin, seeing it through her eyes. Dust in the corners, mending piled in a basket. The garden outside was half overgrown with weeds. "Everything. The place has been falling apart since my mother died. I keep up with the animals and the cattle, but the house and garden have suffered. Then that is where I will start." Olivia stood up, suddenly energized. "Show me the garden and I will work on that today. This afternoon I can start on the mending. Tomorrow we can deep clean the house." "You do not have to do all that. I want to. I need to keep busy, Gabriel. If I sit still, I think too much about everything that has happened, and that way lies nothing good." He understood that. After his mother died, he had worked himself nearly to exhaustion every day for months, because stopping meant feeling and feeling meant pain. "All right, let me show you the garden." They spent the rest of the morning outside. Gabriel showed her the vegetable garden his mother had planted every year, now mostly choked with weeds and dried stalks from lack of care. Olivia rolled up her sleeves and dug in with a determination that impressed him. He left her to it and went to work on repairs to the fence line that had been nagging at him for weeks, but he found himself drifting back toward the house throughout the day, checking on her. She was always working, her face flushed with exertion, dirt on her hands and dress. She was humming at one point, a tune he did not recognize, and the sound made the ranch feel less empty. They ate lunch together, then dinner. Olivia insisted on cooking the evening meal, and Gabriel let her, watching as she moved around his kitchen with increasing confidence. She made rabbit stew from meat he had smoked the week before, with vegetables from the cellar and dumplings that reminded him painfully of his mother's cooking. "This is good," he said after the first bite. "Really good. My mother taught me." She said a woman should be able to feed her family even when times are hard, because food is love in its most basic form. Olivia's eyes were distant, lost in memory. "I used to think that was sentimental nonsense, but after she died, every meal I cooked felt like keeping a piece of her alive." "I know that feeling." They ate in comfortable silence after that. When the dishes were clean and the fire banked for the night, they stood awkwardly in the main room. This was the pattern they would fall into, Gabriel realized. Days together, nights apart, two lonely people sharing space but not quite connecting. "Good night," Olivia said, moving toward the bedroom door. "Good night," Gabriel replied. She paused in the doorway and looked back at him. The lamplight caught in her hair, turning it to burnished copper. "Thank you, Gabriel, for today, for giving me something to do, for treating me like a person instead of property. It means more than you know." Before he could respond, she disappeared into the bedroom and closed the door. He heard the bar slide into place, and once again he was alone in the main room with his mother's rocking chair and his thoughts. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Gabriel would wake at dawn, start the coffee, and then head out to tend the animals. Olivia would emerge shortly after and they would share breakfast together. Then they would work, sometimes separately, sometimes together. She attacked the garden with fierce determination, bringing order to chaos. She mended his clothes, cleaned the house until it shone, even reorganized the shelves to make better sense. Gabriel found himself looking forward to their meals together, to the small conversations they had throughout the day. He learned that she loved to read, but had not had access to books in years. He gave her the small collection his mother had kept, mostly novels and poetry. In the evenings, Olivia would sit by the lamp and read while Gabriel whittled or tended to ranch business. It was domestic and peaceful, and Gabriel felt the loneliness that had plagued him for 2 years slowly beginning to ease. On the 4th day, he woke to find Olivia already up and making breakfast. That was unusual. She was normally a late sleeper, exhausted from the previous day's work. "You are up early," he said, accepting the coffee she handed him. "I was thinking," she said, not meeting his eyes. "About the future." Gabriel's stomach clenched. "Are you planning to leave?" "No, not yet, but I was thinking about what happens when the debt is paid off, where I go, what I do." She finally looked at him, her green eyes serious. "I do not have any family, Gabriel, no place that is home. I could go anywhere, but that also means I have nowhere to go. Does that make sense?" "Yes. I was wondering if maybe when the time comes I could stay here. Not as someone working off a debt, but as a hired hand. You said yourself the ranch needs help. I am strong, I can work hard, and I am learning how things run around here." You could pay me a fair wage, and I could stay in the bedroom, and we could just be two people living on the same property and working together." She said it all in a rush, like she was afraid he would interrupt or refuse before she finished. Gabriel felt his heart beating faster in his chest. The idea of her staying, of not waking up one day to find her gone, filled him with relief so strong it almost frightened him. "You would want to stay here, even after you are free to go. Where else would I go? At least here I have a roof over my head, work to do, and someone who treats me with respect. That is more than I have had since my parents died." Gabriel set down his coffee cup and looked at her directly. "Olivia, you can stay here as long as you want, debt or no debt. You do not have to wait until some contract is fulfilled. This ranch is big enough for two people, and honestly, having you here has made it feel less like a prison and more like a home again." Her eyes widened. "You mean that? I do not say things I do not mean. Then yes, I would like to stay. Not as property, not as an indentured servant, but as a partner. Someone who works this land with you and shares in its successes and failures." "A partner," Gabriel repeated, testing the word. It felt right. "Yes, I would like that." Olivia smiled, bright and genuine, and held out her hand. "Partners?" Gabriel took her hand, her small fingers warm in his. "Partners." They shook on it, and something shifted in the air between them. What had been tentative and uncertain became solid, a foundation they could build on. Gabriel felt it in the way Olivia's shoulders relaxed, the way her smile reached her eyes. She had been waiting for security, for some promise that she would not be cast out on a whim, and he had given her that. What he did not expect was how much her decision to stay would mean to him. Time moved differently after that. Days flowed into weeks. Gabriel rode into town and bought Olivia proper clothes that fit, and a few other things he thought she might need. She protested the expense, but he saw the pleasure in her eyes when she held up a new dress, and that was worth every penny. They worked the ranch together, falling into an easy partnership. Olivia learned to help with the cattle, to ride Rusty when Gabriel needed to cover ground on foot, to shoot a rifle well enough to scare off predators. Gabriel taught her everything his father had taught him, and she absorbed it all with quick intelligence. In the evenings they talked. Really talked. Olivia told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents and their small farm, about the books she had read, and the dreams she had once had of traveling east to see the ocean. Gabriel told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's steady presence and his mother's warmth, about how lonely the world had become after they were gone. "You ever think about leaving?" Olivia asked one night as they sat on the porch watching the stars. "Selling this place and starting fresh somewhere else?" Gabriel considered the question. "Sometimes, but this ranch is all I have of my parents. My father built that barn with his own hands. My mother planted every tree around this property. They are buried up on the hill overlooking the river. Leaving would feel like abandoning them. They are not in the ground, Gabriel. They are in you, in the way you work, the way you care for things, the way you treat people with kindness even when the world does not deserve it. You could leave tomorrow and they would still be with you." He looked at her, surprised by the insight. "You think so? I know so. My parents are not in Missouri anymore. They are in every meal I cook, every garden I tend, every moment I choose to be kind when I could choose to be hard. We carry our dead with us wherever we go. The location does not matter." Gabriel thought about that for a long time, watching the way moonlight caught in Olivia's hair, the way her profile looked almost ethereal in the silvery glow. When had she become so essential to his happiness? When had he started thinking of the ranch as theirs instead of his? He did not have answers, but he knew something had changed. He was not just lonely Cowboy anymore. He was Gabriel Preston, and Olivia Anderson was his partner, and that meant something. Summer faded into early fall. The days were still hot, but the nights grew cooler, hinting at the winter to come. Gabriel made his second cattle drive to the railhead, and this time Olivia came with him, helping to move the herd. She rode well now, confident in the saddle, and the cattle responded to her calm presence. They sold the cattle for a good price, better than Gabriel had expected. As they rode back toward Hillsborough with the money safely tucked away, Gabriel made a decision. "I am going to pay off Kemp," he said. "Today. Right now, I have the money and I want that contract gone." Olivia looked at him in surprise. "You do not have to do that yet. We agreed on a timeline." "I know, but I do not want it hanging over us anymore. I want you to be truly free, not bound by some paper that says you owe anyone anything." "Gabriel, let me do this, Olivia, please." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let us go settle my debt." They rode into Hillsborough in the late afternoon. The town was busy with the usual traffic of a Thursday. Gabriel led them straight to the Railroad Hotel, where Douglas Kemp kept his office. The man looked up in surprise when they entered, his eyes flicking from Gabriel to Olivia and back. Well, Gabriel Preston and his purchase. What can I do for you?" Gabriel had to clench his jaw to keep from saying something he would regret. "I am here to pay off Miss Anderson's original debt, $240. Kemp leaned back in his chair, eyes calculating. "The contract is for 3 years of service. The contract is to work off a debt of $240. I am paying that debt. The contract is fulfilled." "That is not how this works, Preston. The girl is bound to you for 3 years. That is the deal." Gabriel leaned forward, planting his hands on the desk. "The deal was that she works off a debt that was not hers to begin with. I am paying that debt in full. Give me a receipt of payment, mark the contract as fulfilled, and we walk away. Otherwise, I will find a lawyer and we will go through every word of that contract until we find the loopholes that make it illegal." Kemp's eyes narrowed. "You would do that? Spend money on lawyers for a girl you bought at auction? She is not a girl I bought. She is a person whose freedom was stolen, and yes, I would do that." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Kemp sighed and pulled out a ledger. "Fine. $240 and I will mark the debt paid. But Preston, you are a fool. You could have had 3 years of work out of her." Gabriel counted out the money and placed it on the desk. "Write the receipt." Kemp did, his pen scratching across paper. He handed the receipt to Gabriel and pulled out another document, the contract, and marked it with a stamp that said "paid in full." "There. She is all yours, free and clear. Satisfied?" "The contract is void," Gabriel said. "She is not mine. She is her own person." He took Olivia's arm and led her out of the office. Once they were outside, she turned to him, her eyes bright with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it. I told you I would." "I know, but I did not really believe it until now. No one has ever kept a promise to me before." "Not like this." Gabriel took the contract from his pocket and handed it to her. "It is yours. Burn it, keep it, do whatever you want with it. But you are free now, Olivia, truly free." She took the paper with trembling hands and stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked up at him, and the expression on her face made his breath catch. It was gratitude and relief and something else, something deeper that he did not have a name for. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you, Gabriel." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was the silence of understanding, of shared triumph. When they arrived home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Olivia stood in front of the cabin, the contract in her hands, and Gabriel brought her a match. She lit the corner of the paper and watched it burn, the flames consuming the words that had bound her. When it was nothing but ash scattered on the ground, she turned to Gabriel. "I am free," she said, like she was testing the words. "You are free." and I choose to stay here with you." Gabriel's heart stuttered in his chest. "You do, I do. Not because I have to, but because I want to, because this ranch feels like home, because you feel like home." She took a step closer to him, her eyes searching his face. "Is that all right? Can I stay?" "Olivia, I would be devastated if you left." "Then I am staying. As your partner, your friend, and maybe someday as something more if you want that too. Something more." The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Gabriel had been so focused on saving her, on doing the right thing, that he had not let himself acknowledge the feelings that had been growing since that first night. The way his day felt incomplete until he heard her voice. The way her smile made the whole world seem brighter. The way he had started thinking in terms of we instead of I. "I want that," he said quietly. "I have wanted that for a while now, but I did not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated. I do not feel obligated. I feel lucky." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. "You saved me, Gabriel, not just from that auction, but from giving up on the idea that there are good people in the world. You gave me hope again." "You saved me too," he said. "I was drowning in loneliness before you came. You made me remember what it feels like to have something to look forward to." They stood there as the sun finished setting, hands clasped, the beginning of something new unfolding between them. Gabriel knew they had time to figure out what that something was. No rush, no pressure. They had burned the contract. They were both free to choose, and they were choosing each other. That night after dinner, Olivia did not immediately retreat to the bedroom. Instead, she sat with Gabriel by the fire, her chair pulled close to his. They talked until late, about nothing and everything, and when she finally said goodnight, she squeezed his hand before letting go. Gabriel lay in his mother's rocking chair that night and stared at the ceiling, his heart full of something he had not felt in years. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love. The days that followed were different. There was a lightness to Olivia now that she was truly free, a joy in her movements and her laughter. She sang while she worked, her voice carrying across the ranch. Gabriel found himself smiling more, laughing at her jokes, looking for excuses to work near her just to be close. They were courting, he realized, even if neither of them said the word. It was there in the way she touched his arm when she passed him, in the way he made sure to bring her wildflowers from the fields, in the lingering looks and small smiles. 2 weeks after the contract burned, Gabriel rode into town again for supplies. While there, he stopped by the general store and made a purchase he had been thinking about for days. The storekeeper wrapped it carefully, and Gabriel tucked it into his saddlebag, his heart pounding. He returned home in the late afternoon to find Olivia in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer vegetables. She looked up when she heard Rusty's hooves and waved, her face lit with genuine happiness to see him. That was when Gabriel knew for certain. This was not just fondness or convenience or gratitude. This was love, real and deep and true. He dismounted and walked over to her, suddenly nervous. "Olivia, can we talk?" She set down her basket, concern flickering across her face. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "No, the opposite, actually." He took a deep breath. "I have been thinking about what you said about staying here as something more. And I realized I have not been entirely honest with you." "About what?" "About how I feel. I told you that you made me remember what it feels like to look forward to something, but that is not the whole truth. The truth is that you are the only thing I look forward to. Seeing you every morning, talking to you every evening, working beside you every day. You are not just my partner or my friend. You are the person I want to spend my life with." Olivia's eyes were wide, her lips parted in surprise. "Gabriel, I love you, Olivia." I think I started falling in love with you that first night when you looked at me like you were trying to figure out if I was going to be a monster or a man. And every day since then, I have fallen a little more. I know it has not been that long, and I know this is sudden, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel. It is not sudden, Olivia said, her voice trembling. Or maybe it is, but it does not feel that way. It feels like you have been part of my life forever. Like I was just waiting to find you. She closed the distance between them and took both of his hands in hers. I love you too, Gabriel Preston. I did not want to say it because I was afraid you would think it was gratitude or obligation, but it is not. It is real. You are the best man I have ever known, and I want to spend my life with you. Gabriel felt like his heart might burst. He pulled one hand free and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Olivia gasped when she saw it. This was my mother's, Gabriel said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. My father gave it to her when they married. She made me promise before she died that I would only give it to someone I loved truly and completely, someone who would treasure it the way she did. Tears were streaming down Olivia's face now. Gabriel, are you asking me to marry you? Yes. I know we have not been together long by conventional standards, and I know we should probably wait, but I do not want to wait. I want you to be my wife. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, a real life, a family. Will you marry me, Olivia? Yes, she breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it was always meant to be there. Olivia held up her hand, watching the diamond catch the late afternoon light, then threw her arms around Gabriel's neck. He caught her and held her close, his face buried in her hair. She smelled like sunshine and earth, and the lavender soap she had made using his mother's recipe. She felt like home. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. Gabriel cupped her face in his hands and kissed her for the first time, gentle and sweet, a promise of everything to come. I cannot believe this is real, Olivia whispered against his lips. 6 weeks ago I was being sold at an auction, and now I am engaged to the man I love. It is real, Gabriel assured her. This is real. We are real. They stood in the garden as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, planning a future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. They would marry soon, Gabriel said. No point in waiting when they both knew what they wanted. They would have the local preacher come to the ranch, keep it simple and small. Just the two of them and their vows and the land that would be their life together. Olivia agreed to all of it, her eyes shining with happiness. She kept looking at the ring on her finger like she could not quite believe it was there. That night, she did not retreat to the bedroom. Instead, they sat together on the porch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and talked about their future. Children, they both wanted children. At least 2, maybe more. They would expand the ranch slowly, carefully, building it into something they could pass down to those future children. They would grow old together in this place, watching the seasons change, watching their family grow. It was the most hopeful Gabriel had felt since his parents died. No, more than that. It was the most hopeful he had ever felt in his entire life. They married 3 weeks later on a crisp October morning. The preacher from Hillsborough came out to the ranch, along with his wife to serve as witness. Olivia wore a dress that had belonged to Gabriel's mother, altered to fit her slender frame. It was ivory silk, simple but elegant, and Gabriel thought she had never looked more beautiful. He wore his best suit, the one he saved for rare trips to church or important business. His hands shook as he slid the second ring onto Olivia's finger, a simple gold band to match the engagement ring. The ceremony was short and sweet. They spoke their vows with the cottonwood trees rustling overhead and the river murmuring in the background. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Gabriel did so with a reverence that made Olivia blush. They were married, husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. The preacher and his wife stayed for a celebratory lunch that Olivia had prepared that morning, then departed, leaving the newlyweds alone. Gabriel and Olivia stood together in the doorway of their cabin, watching the wagon disappear down the trail. "Mrs. Preston," Gabriel said, testing out the name. "Mrs. Preston," Olivia repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that. So do I." They went inside, and for the first time, Olivia did not go to the bedroom alone. They went together, husband and wife, to begin their new life in the most intimate way. The months that followed were the happiest of Gabriel's life. He and Olivia settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They worked the ranch together during the day, shared their meals and their conversations in the evening, and held each other close at night. The loneliness that had plagued Gabriel for so long was completely gone, replaced by a contentment so deep it sometimes overwhelmed him. Winter came, and they spent the long, dark evenings by the fire. Gabriel would read aloud from books while Olivia knitted or mended. Sometimes they just talked, sharing stories from their pasts, making plans for their future. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, simply enjoying each other's presence. Christmas was quiet but joyful. They exchanged small gifts. Gabriel gave Olivia a set of hair combs he had ordered from a catalog, tortoiseshell inlaid with mother-of-pearl. She gave him a new hat she had made herself, felt lined with leather, perfect for the cold winter days. They cooked a special meal and toasted their first Christmas together with cider. "Last Christmas I was alone," Gabriel said as they sat by the fire that night. "I did not even bother cooking anything special. I just worked all day to avoid thinking about how empty the house felt. Last Christmas I was still with my uncle's family, feeling like an unwanted burden," Olivia said. "I never imagined that by the next Christmas I would be married to a wonderful man in a home that is truly mine." "Ours," Gabriel corrected gently. "This is our home." "Ours," she agreed and kissed him. Spring arrived with a rush of wildflowers and new calves. Olivia threw herself into expanding the garden, planting vegetables and herbs and even flowers just because they were pretty. Gabriel watched her work, humming to herself, and felt his love for her deepen even more. In late April, Olivia started feeling ill in the mornings. At first she brushed it off as something she ate, but when it continued for a week, Gabriel insisted they see the doctor in town. They rode to Hillsborough together, both of them worried. The doctor, an older man named Henderson, examined Olivia while Gabriel waited outside. When they emerged, Olivia was glowing, her eyes bright with tears. The doctor was smiling. "Congratulations, Gabriel," he said. "You are going to be a father. Mrs. Preston is about 2 months along, if I had to guess. Baby should arrive sometime in November." Gabriel felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. A father. He was going to be a father. He looked at Olivia, who was crying and laughing at the same time, and suddenly he was crying too. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, overwhelmed with joy and terror and love. "We are having a baby," Olivia whispered against his chest. "Gabriel, we are having a baby." "We are," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are having a baby." They rode home in a daze, talking nonstop about the future. They would need to prepare a space for the baby, get supplies, figure out how to care for an infant. Gabriel was terrified that he would be a terrible father, but Olivia assured him he would be wonderful. She was nervous too, she admitted. Her own mother had died when Olivia was 16, so she did not have anyone to ask for advice. But they would figure it out together, the way they figured out everything else. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Olivia bloomed, her body changing to accommodate the new life growing inside her. Gabriel was endlessly fascinated by it, the way her belly rounded, the way she would sometimes place his hand on her stomach so he could feel the baby kick. He became fiercely protective, taking over the heavier chores and insisting she rest more. Olivia protested at first but eventually gave in when she realized he needed to take care of her as much as she needed the help. They spent the long summer evenings on the porch, talking about baby names and making plans. If it was a boy, they would name him after Gabriel's father, Thomas. If it was a girl, they would name her after Olivia's mother, Catherine. "Either way, this baby is already so loved," Olivia said one night, her hand on her belly. "I never thought I would have this, Gabriel. A family of my own. A real home. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life alone and afraid." "You are never going to be alone again," Gabriel promised. "You have me and you have our baby, and that is just the beginning. We are going to fill this ranch with children and laughter and love. That is my promise to you." "I believe you," Olivia said, and she smiled that smile that still made his heart skip a beat. "I believe in us." November arrived with the first hints of winter. Olivia's time was drawing near and Gabriel was a bundle of nerves. He had arranged for the doctor to come stay at the ranch when her labor began, and he had stocked the house with everything they might need. But still, he worried. The labor began on a cold November night just after dinner. Olivia gasped and grabbed Gabriel's arm, her face going pale. "It is time," she said. Gabriel helped her to the bedroom, then rode like mad to fetch the doctor. By the time they returned, Olivia's contractions were coming fast and hard. The doctor took over, sending Gabriel out of the room. He paced the main room for hours, listening to Olivia's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. Just before dawn, he heard a different sound. A baby's cry, thin and reedy but strong. Gabriel froze, his heart pounding. Then the door opened and the doctor emerged, smiling. "You have a son," he said, "a healthy baby boy, and your wife did beautifully. She is tired but well. Go meet your son, Gabriel." Gabriel stumbled into the bedroom on legs that felt like water. Olivia was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Gabriel approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "Meet Thomas," Olivia whispered, pulling back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, eyes scrunched shut, a tuft of dark hair on his head. Gabriel reached out with a trembling hand and touched his son's cheek. The baby was so small, so perfect, so miraculous. Tears were streaming down Gabriel's face, and he did not even try to stop them. "He is beautiful," Gabriel managed to say. "You are beautiful. This is the most amazing thing I have ever seen." "Hold him," Olivia said, and carefully transferred the baby into Gabriel's arms. Gabriel cradled his son, terrified he might break something, but the baby just snuggled against his chest and made a small, contented sound. Gabriel looked down at the tiny person in his arms and felt his entire world shift. This was his son, his child. A life he and Olivia had created together out of love. "I love you," he said to Olivia, then looked down at the baby. "I love you both more than I knew it was possible to love anything." "We love you too," Olivia said, her eyes shining with tears. Our family, Gabriel agreed. As the sun rose on that November morning, Gabriel Preston stood by the window holding his newborn son, with his wife resting peacefully nearby. He thought about how his life had changed in just over a year. How he had been a lonely cowboy, drowning in grief and isolation. Until one midnight when he made an impulsive decision to buy a young woman's contract at an auction. By dawn, she had been wearing his mother's wedding ring in his heart, if not yet on her finger. And now, a year later, she was his wife, the mother of his child, the center of his entire world. It had not been a smooth or easy journey. They had both carried scars from their pasts, had both been afraid to trust, to hope, to love. But they had found each other in the darkness, and together they had built something beautiful. The baby stirred in his arms and opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, looking up at his father with an expression of vague confusion. Gabriel smiled down at him. "Welcome to the world, Thomas Preston," he whispered. "You are going to have a good life, I promise you that. You are going to grow up knowing you are loved, knowing you are safe, knowing you have a home. Your mother and I are going to make sure of it." The baby yawned. A tiny, perfect yawn, and Gabriel's heart melted even more if that was possible. The years that followed were full of the chaos and joy that comes with raising children. Thomas was followed 2 years later by Catherine, then another boy they named Henry after Olivia's father, and finally another girl they named Margaret after Gabriel's mother. 4 children in 8 years, and the ranch was never quiet again. Gabriel and Olivia expanded the cabin, adding more rooms to accommodate their growing family. They built a proper house, actually, using money saved from successful cattle sales. It was not grand, but it was sturdy and spacious, with enough bedrooms for all the children and a large kitchen where the family gathered for meals. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Gabriel proved to have a good head for business, and Olivia was a tireless worker who could do anything from birthing calves to keeping the books. Together they built something substantial, a legacy they could be proud of. But more than the prosperity, more than the success, what mattered was the love. The family they had created filled the ranch with laughter and noise and life. The children grew up knowing they were cherished, that their home was a safe haven, that their parents loved each other and loved them. Gabriel and Olivia never forgot where they had started, how close they had both come to being lost forever. On their anniversary each year, they would sit on the porch after the children were in bed and talk about that night in Hillsborough, about the auction, about the choice Gabriel had made. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked on their 10th anniversary. "Spending all that money on me, you could have had a much easier life." Gabriel looked at his wife, her hair now streaked with a few silver strands, her face showing the lines of a life well lived. She was even more beautiful to him than she had been at 23, because now she carried the story of their life together in every smile line and every gray hair. "I have never regretted it for a single second," he said firmly. "You are the best decision I ever made. You and our children are my whole world. Without you, I would have died lonely and bitter in that cabin, never knowing what it meant to truly live." "You saved my life that night," Olivia said, taking his hand. The rings she wore, both engagement and wedding band, caught the lamplight. She had never taken them off. "We saved each other," Gabriel corrected. "I was just as lost as you were. We found each other in the darkness and we built a life in the light. That is not one person saving another. That is 2 people choosing each other, over and over, every day." "I choose you," Olivia said softly. "I choose you too," Gabriel replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that until I draw my last breath." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge overhead. Inside the house, they could hear the children settling down for the night, Thomas reading a story to the younger ones in the voice he had inherited from his father. This was everything Gabriel had never dared to dream of. This was home, family, love, and purpose. This was a life built on the foundation of one midnight decision that had changed everything. As they grew older, Gabriel and Olivia remained each other's center. They worked side by side well into their 50s, only gradually turning over more of the ranch work to their children. Thomas proved to have his father's steady nature and took to ranching naturally. Catherine was fierce and intelligent, with her mother's determination. Henry was quieter, thoughtful, with a gift for animals. Margaret was the wild one, always climbing trees and getting into mischief, but with a heart of gold. The children grew and married and had children of their own, and the ranch became a gathering place for the extended family. Gabriel and Olivia's cabin, now a substantial house, was always full of grandchildren running through the rooms, filling the air with laughter. Gabriel sometimes thought about his parents, buried on the hill overlooking the river, and hoped they could see what he had built. They had given him the foundation, the land, the values that guided him. He had taken those gifts and created something beautiful. When Gabriel was 65, he and Olivia sat their children down and told them they were retiring from active ranch work. Thomas and Catherine would take over the main operations, with Henry and Margaret partnering with them. Gabriel and Olivia would remain on the property, in the house they loved, but their working days were over. "I want to spend my remaining years just enjoying your mother," Gabriel told his children. "We worked hard for 4 decades. Now it is time to rest and watch the sunsets and count our blessings." None of the children argued. They had grown up watching their parents' love story, had seen firsthand what it meant to build a life with someone. They wanted that same happiness for their own parents now. So Gabriel and Olivia entered the final phase of their lives together. They spent their days in simple pleasures. Gardening together, reading to each other, watching their grandchildren play, taking slow walks along the river, sitting on the porch in the evenings, hands clasped, talking or simply enjoying the silence. "You remember that night?" Olivia asked one evening. They were in their 70s now, both of them showing the wear of a life fully lived, but their eyes still held the same spark. "Which night?" Gabriel asked, though he knew. "The night you bought my contract, the ride home, how terrified I was, how I asked you if you were going to hurt me." "I remember," Gabriel said quietly. "I remember everything about that night." "I did not trust you then," Olivia said. "I did not trust anyone. I had been betrayed by my family, sold like property. I thought you were just another man who saw me as something to use. And now I know you are the best man I have ever known. You are my partner, my love, my home. You have been all of that from almost the very beginning. I was just too scared to see it at first." Gabriel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You made me whole, Olivia. I did not even know how broken I was until you came along and showed me what it meant to be truly alive." "We made each other whole," she corrected, echoing the words he had said decades ago. "That is what love does. It fills in the missing pieces." They sat together as the sun set, two people who had found each other in the darkest moment and had built a lifetime of light together. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, generations of family carrying on the legacy they had started. Gabriel Preston died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, with Olivia holding his hand. His last words to her were, "I love you," the same words he had said to her every day for 42 years. Olivia lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She spent those years telling stories about Gabriel, making sure the younger generations knew what kind of man he had been. She told them about the auction, about the midnight ride, about how he had given her his mother's ring and asked her to marry him in a garden full of vegetables. "Your grandfather saw someone in trouble and decided to help, even though it cost him everything he had," she would tell her grandchildren. "He did not do it for reward or recognition. He did it because it was right. That is the kind of person you should strive to be." She told them about the love they had shared, how it had started from fear and uncertainty, but had grown into something unshakable. Love is not just a feeling, she would say. It is a choice you make every day. Your grandfather and I chose each other every single day for over 4 decades. That is what made our love strong. When Olivia passed at the age of 84, she was buried beside Gabriel on the hill overlooking the river, just as she had always wanted. Their graves were simple, marked with stones that bore their names, their years, and a single inscription: "Together always." The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Thomas and his siblings, then to their children and their children's children. The story of Gabriel and Olivia became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of where they had all come from. In the house, now much expanded and modernized but still standing on the same foundation Gabriel's father had laid, one room was kept as a sort of shrine. It held Gabriel's mother's rocking chair, the one he had slept in that first night after bringing Olivia home. It held Olivia's first carpetbag, worn and faded but treasured. And on the mantel, in a place of honor, was a small frame containing a burned fragment of paper, the only piece of the contract that had survived when Olivia burned it all those years ago. Beside it was a photograph, one of the few that existed of Gabriel and Olivia together. It had been taken on their 25th anniversary. They stood in front of their house, Gabriel tall and solid, Olivia small and fierce, both of them smiling with the kind of deep contentment that comes from a life well lived. On Olivia's hand, clearly visible even in the old photograph, was the wedding ring Gabriel had given her that October morning decades earlier. The ring itself was passed down to their granddaughter, also named Olivia, who wore it on her own wedding day and then gave it to her daughter, continuing the tradition. Each woman who wore it knew the story, knew what the ring represented. It was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of love found in the darkest places, of choices made with courage and hope, of two people who built something beautiful out of brokenness. And so the legacy of Gabriel Preston and Olivia Anderson lived on, not just in the ranch they had built or the children they had raised, but in the story itself. A story about a lonely cowboy who made an impulsive decision at midnight to save a young woman in distress. A cowboy who took her home, gave her his mother's bed, his mother's dress, and eventually his mother's wedding ring. A cowboy who saw past his own loneliness to recognize someone else's pain, and in saving her, saved himself. It was a love story, yes, but more than that. It was a story about choosing to see the humanity in others, about acting with kindness even when the world does not demand it, about building something lasting out of a single moment of compassion. In the end, that midnight decision rippled forward through time, affecting not just Gabriel and Olivia, but every generation that came after. Every child born on that ranch, every family gathering held in that house, every sunset watched from that porch was a testament to the choice Gabriel made when he raised his hand at an auction in Hillsborough, New Mexico Territory, in the summer of 1877. By dawn, she was wearing his mother's wedding ring in his heart. By the end of their lives, she wore it on her hand, and it carried with it a lifetime of love, commitment, and the unshakable belief that two broken people can come together and create something whole. Their story ended, as all stories must, but the love remained. In the land they had worked together, in the children they had raised, in the family that continued to grow and thrive on the ranch they had built, and in the simple gold ring that passed from mother to daughter, generation after generation, carrying with it the reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places if you are brave enough to reach for it. Gabriel and Olivia Preston had lived well, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. What more could anyone ask for?